and they spent that along with their state money. Similarly, the community colleges get a portion of the local property tax, and all of them combined statewide collect and spend about $1 billion. Not the universities, but the colleges do get property tax money. Okay, so now we're to the last category of money that the state keeps track of, and it's mostly federal money that comes in from the federal government, and a few other exceptions that I'll mention. And kind of like the property tax money, does not go through the legislature's spending process. Whatever schools or state agencies qualify for federal money, the money comes directly to them and they spend it along with their state and local money. For example, the K-12 schools throughout the state receive about $2 billion of federal money each year. Now, most of that federal money is associated with two groups of students, special education and low income. So these are your special ed programs and your free and reduced lunch programs, or anything that's based on income levels. There's a few other small minor ones, but those are the two big ones. There's also a couple of $1 billion of federal and some other money, this is not all federal, that ends up in the higher education system. About 2/3 of this $2 billion, so 1.4 or something, is federal money, a variety of different federal monies that end up in the universities and community colleges, Pell Grants and research grants and any type of federal money that ends up in a university or community college. The other 1/3 is the tuition money that students are paying as a portion of their expense. But the federal and the tuition monies add up to about $2 billion a year. By far the largest chunk of federal money that comes into the state each year goes to health and welfare. And this is before the federal health care legislation. And then I'm going to come around over here. In addition to the about $3.5 billion that we spend of state money on health and welfare, we receive and spend each year about $6.5 billion of federal money. Now in most states this is called Medicaid. It's federal health care for the poor. And in most states the federal government is running a Medicaid program with their money, separate and apart from whatever the state's doing with their money for kind of the same group of people, but in most states it's two different programs. We were the last state to kind of accept coming into the Medicaid program decades ago. And when we did so with a very unique arrangement between the federal government. We don't let them one program with their money and we run our program with our money. We take their money and our money, we combine it together and we run it all through Access. And it's kind of on a matching deal. If we want, for every $2 of federal money that we want or expect to receive, we have to commit to spend $1 of state money. So it's kind of a 2-to-1 match. We put it all together and run it through Access. So the total is about $10 billion a year. Then there's a few other stragglers. There's about $500 million each, so it makes up $1 billion. The state lottery collects about $500 million a year in ticket sales. By the time they pay their winning tickets, which are programmed to be about 80% of whatever they sold, they have about $100 million a year that goes to a variety of beneficiaries that were identified in the lottery program. The voters passed it 20, 30 years ago. There's also the Workers' Compensation Program. That's the state compensation fund of Arizona that businesses pay into in case their employees get injured. There's about $500 million each in these two categories. There's about $500 million of federal money, mostly from the EPA, that comes in to clean up something that got dirty in Arizona, the water, the air, some dirt, some something. And then there's about $500 million that goes through the State Department of Administration, which is mostly state employee health care and retirement and benefits and things like that. And then there's hundreds of other little federal monies that come into the state each year that add up to about $500 million. So as you can see, the total amount of government and spending that we kind of keep track of at the state level is not just the $10.5 billion in the general fund. The total is about $31 or $32 billion a year, but you can see where the big three are. Almost $11 billion a year in K-12. Now it's down from that. This was kind of at its high point in '09. And when I show you where we are today, I'll readjust a couple of these stacks. The three big stacks will still be the three big stacks, but almost $11 billion a year in K-12, about $10 billion a year in health and welfare, about $5 billion a year in higher education, and everything else combined is 5 or 6 total. So those are definitely the big 3. So now let's go quickly. Again, I'm cutting into the time of the most important person in Chandler, but let's go a little more detail on just the yellow boxes and how did we get to where the budget is today, and where is the budget today? Are we in the black, are we in the red, or what's going on? So everything on these 2 charts will just be about the general fund. And I see that one of my assistants just passed around a little sign-up list that if you want to be on, what do we call it, the Insiders Club or something at the Secretary of State's office, we can send you little updates about what's going on. And in fact, some of these things, I think this has been videoed and is on YouTube and Vimeo and a few other places. Anyway, okay. Now a little more detail as to what happened to the general fund budget over the last 4 or 5 years and where are we at today. And I've had to expand the board because we're now in the 2013 budget. Okay, we're going to start with the 2007 budget because that's the last time it was really balanced, and also happens to be the last time I was at the legislature, so I knew a lot about the 07 budget. And then they sent me home with a few others because of term limits, and it all went to, no, I didn't. Okay, in 2007, the general fund that I built over there, the yellow box, is at 10.5. In 2007, it was 9.5. But the proportions were very similar. Almost half to K-12, 10% to higher ed, 10% to the prison court system, about 25% to health and welfare, and everything else was 5% or less. Fortunately, in 07, the income coming into the general fund, the sales and income taxes, were also $9.5 billion, so the budget was balanced. And because 05 and 06 had been a very, I hope I don't spit all over you, Jack. It's a nice soup, it'll clean up. Because 05 and 06 had been a very, the economy was healthy and Chandler was just booming and going and paying a bunch of sales tax and income tax. In 05 and 06, we had saved over $1 billion of money that we hadn't budgeted to spend, and more came in, so we just socked it away in the rainy day fund. We had $1.1 billion of reserve money on hand. So things looked pretty good in 07. And we had worked hard to get these 2 in balance, because they hadn't even been in balance several years before that either. In 2008, the spending went from $9.5 billion to $10.5 billion. The 10.5 that I built over here, that was the 2008 general fund. That was the budget in 2008. $10.5 billion, and it went to the places where we showed. Unfortunately, that's when the economic downturn started to occur, and the revenue wasn't growing. The revenue was dropping already slightly. It went down to about $9 billion. So $9 billion coming in, 10.5 going out. So we had about a $1.5 billion shortfall in 2008. And how did the governor and the legislature get through that? Well, they used about $900 million of the $1.1 billion of reserve monies that we had left, transferred it into the general fund to kind of cover the shortfall. They also started some what I consider to be some accounting tricks and gimmicks that we had worked hard to get rid of a few years before. One of them was to delay the payments to the school districts throughout the state. The state uses a fiscal year. We start counting the money on July the 1st and then on June the 30th. I think that we do that so that all of the education dollars are in one budget year, since schools normally start in the fall and then in the spring. The other thing we do in Arizona is we have a cash accounting system. We only recognize an expense if we actually write the check or send the money out that month or that year. Well, that creates the temptation for them to delay a payment to somebody that the state owes money to. And to make the general fund budget look more balanced than it really was in 2008, the big payments that go out to the K-12 schools goes out in a monthly payment. And the 12th payment each year is the June 15th payment. Well, instead of sending the payment out on June the 15th, if you wait 16 days and send it out on July the 1st, July is the new budget year, and it looks like you didn't have a June payment. But now how many do you have next year? 13. But on paper, it looks like you only had 11 payments this year. And so you can make the books look like you saved $300 million by not sending the payment out to the schools when you're supposed to. Now, most of you in private business would go to jail for doing stuff like that, but the government gets to do it. The other thing they do is that they swept money from these other funds that are collected for certain programs or whatever, and told those programs, you got to wait or delay whatever you were going to use it for because we need it over in the general fund. And they transferred or swept $300 million over to the general fund. But that got them through a $1.5 billion shortage in 2008. In 2009, this was kind of a unique year. The first half of the budget was established by the Napolitano administration, and the last half was Brewer. But the first budget for 2009, they set the spending at $11 billion. Even though they really were only projecting at that time that about 8 was coming in. The recession was deepening, and 8's coming in, but they initially set it at 11 for spending. They almost immediately began to realize that they couldn't. I think Napolitano's administration cut the spending from 11.1. It was actually 11.1 to about 10.7, but it was still higher than the previous year. And then when the Brewer administration got in, they said, well, we can't spend even 10.7. They cut it to about 10. But the recession was worse than feared. The income didn't drop to 8, it dropped to $7 billion. So either way, kind of there was a $3 billion shortage in 2009. How did they get through that? Well, they had $200 million left over in the rainy day fund. They used all of that. They delayed another month's payment